So in general, I was rooting for none of the characters and I hated the setting and I was just uncomfortable. I don't know if I'm enjoying it more necessarily because there have just been a lot of scenes that are kind of horrifying. Much agony. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of my quest to find the best queer YA romance out there. You're excited, I'm excited, I'm hoping these 2 books are going to be great. Without further ado, here is the current tournament bracket. As you can see, I've got my 4 winners already shown. And today's pairing is If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo versus The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigirdar. And that's interesting because Adiba Jaigirdar was the one who wrote Henna and Issue. So we'll see. But that one was fantastic. So I have high hopes for this one. People say it's actually even better. So very nice. And If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo has a trans main character and is another one of the kind of more classics. Old school is probably more accurate terminology, and we will see how it fares, because I was immediately concerned by the fact that even though it has a trans woman as the main character, they cite her dead name in the first paragraph of the blurb. I was like, that feels dodgy to me, that feels wrong, that feels concerning, but we'll see. I mean, to be fair, it's not my place to make a full judgment on this. I'm not trans. I can't say for sure whether it comes across as well or good. I'll give you my thoughts to my eyes and we'll see. We'll see if it, reads as problematic or not. Hopefully not. So come along for the ride. I'll be starting with If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. I hope it's transformative. I just thought it was worth updating you all because I'm only a couple of pages in to If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, but it's such a good opening. Like, seriously, I was just immediately captivated. It's immediately emotional because of an abuse that's alleged to have happened. And this is paragraph 3, by the way. And so it was just a really excellent opening. And I'm really invested in the story now after 10 pages. Good job. So that's really interesting. And I'm definitely feeling much more positive towards the story now. I'm just a little way into If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo now, about 100 pages in, I think, and I'm very much enjoying it. It's really easy, really lighthearted to read, except for the fact that it's set in the American South, and so the whole tone right now is misogyny, transphobia, homophobia. So whenever those moments are happening, I am looking away. But the story itself very much gives me kind of classic teen YA type vibes, just very sweet. And so I'm hoping that the story turns out wholesome. So far, I think there's been some interesting content about trans issues, specifically toxic masculinity type dad who refuses to accept one's child's gender or sexuality differences. But it's tricky. I'm hoping that there's some resolution. I'm now about 200 pages through If I Was Your Girl, and I have to say it's pretty fabulous. So that's about the 2/3 mark. I'm really appreciating the fact that there's been more discussion in the last few chapters of actual trans issues, trans experience. Specifically, there's this kind of growing tension around whether to come out as trans in an environment that is so obviously not going to be positive. And so there's all these questions about whether one's identity is a secret or it needs to be shared, which it obviously doesn't, and about safety and about acceptance. And I'm really appreciating the fact that there's now this kind of slight growing queer community around Amanda, the main character, because she's found at least one person that is also queer and is therefore able to kind of share herself a little bit more with these people. So in an otherwise very horrible environment, I am beginning to appreciate the fact that for Amanda, this is a much more positive experience than it has ever been for her, as in she is able to live a more normal teenage life in this environment that doesn't know her, with the added benefit of now having at least one person to talk to about her experience of being trans in that community. So that's cool. That's cool. It's very powerful, and I'm really absorbed in it, you know, pages are flashing by as I'm reading. And I'm reading on my phone, by the way, which is why I can't show you reading it, because I'm also filming on my phone. To give a bit of a synopsis, Amanda is a trans girl who has spent the last couple of years transitioning, but in her previous environment where she lived with her mum, she was getting incessantly bullied, and people knew that she had transitioned, knew she was trans, and therefore she had one big abusive incident which caused her to finally decide she needed to change things and moves to her dad's house, both mum and dad live in the south. There's a lot of acceptance issues in both places. She certainly gets along with her mother better, but she moves to her dad's house even though he is homophobic, transphobic, etc., because she would like the experience of not being known as trans. She'd like the opportunity to just start again as herself. And that's the story. It's her kind of trying to experience high school, her senior year, as if she were anyone else, and grappling with being trans in a community that doesn't accept that, and friendship and acceptance, coming out and secrets and family. There's a lot of really powerful parts, although I also think Amanda is a little bit annoying as a character herself. Like, I don't think she hasn't really shown much personality yet, and yet kind of it seems everyone around her thinks she's really fantastic and interesting. And it's kind of like, what are you seeing that we, the reader, as Amanda are not? Apart from that she's beautiful, that seems to be the main draw. So I'm a little bit confused by that, and I'm wondering, I think that's maybe a bit of a downfall, that she doesn't appear to kind of show herself very much in the interactions she's having. She's kind and she's quiet, and that's about all we know. But yeah, it's going well so far. And it certainly holds a bit of a contrast to the previous book I've read so far in this challenge with a trans protagonist, which was Cemetery Boys in one of the previous episodes. Because in Cemetery Boys it's completely not at all about Yad trying to start again where he's not known. He is inherently connected to his family and his roots and his background, and so everyone knows him and knows him through his transition, and that's what causes the issues. Whereas we're starting in a kind of parallel universe and further ahead, where Amanda has already transitioned to how she accepts herself, but she also wants to start when no one knows she's even transitioned at all. So that's quite a different storyline, and I'm really appreciating it. Well, hello and welcome to my summer of If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, which was a pretty good one, to be fair. It wasn't like my favourite, but it was also not the worst. So falling somewhere in the middle, I gave it 3.5 stars. Now here's the thing. If I Was Your Girl was particularly interesting because it didn't come from the angle of trying to gain acceptance for the main character's trans identity, but instead about hiding that identity and trying to achieve assimilation instead, which is a different perspective on the trans experience, one that a lot of trans people face, because the threat of danger, which can arise in a lot of locations for being trans, in fact, most locations for being trans, means that assimilation is the safest option. And so that perspective was very interesting to explore in a YA novel. However, that being said, the reason she is assimilating, Amanda, the main character, is assimilating instead of trying to gain acceptance, is that she is in a deep south US setting, which I just found deeply uncomfortable the entire book. Everything about it I hated, like the extremist Christianity and the very violent homophobia and misogyny and all these other things which were just running riot through everything everyone said, except for B. And then of course the plot twist with B, which she never got repercussions for. I also hated that, but you know, that ruined her for me. So in general, I was rooting for none of the characters and I hated the setting and I was just uncomfortable. So I don't think I can say I enjoyed it that much. I also don't think I can say there were particularly diverse characters in that book, because there was a few trans characters that was interesting, that was explored well, about Amanda's first journey into transitioning and her trans support group, and that element was very interesting, including about how a lot of them have since died from suicide and things like that. That was a very important discussion of trans issues from that perspective. There were some trans characters, but there was really not that much else in the way of queer characters, and if there were, they were kind of toxic, except of course for the very small scene right at the end where Amanda's faced something horrible, and then there's one kind of girl that, you know, goes up to her in the corridor and is like, oh, you know, I see you, I'm glad you're back. Essentially a kind of a queer acceptance, queer community kind of moment. That was sweet, you know. I'm sure it's obvious throughout these videos that I really care for queer community being shown in these books, because there's no way of feeling comfortable and accepting yourself and accepting you know, the world around you as queer if you don't have a space to actually share that in your life. So I find it really important that queer community is demonstrated in these books, and apart from that tiny moment at the end and trans support group towards the beginning, there wasn't much of that. I think another issue I had with this book is that it really was trying to demonstrate Amanda as a very normal teenage girl, in that she wants to go to parties and have a boyfriend and all these things, but because it was trying to demonstrate her, like, her attempts at normalness, it actually fell kind of too far into the normal, like, heterosexual white kids YA novel kind of area of literature. And I was just like, I don't care, like, this is boring, and also doesn't really make sense as a juxtaposition to all the stuff going on with Amanda being trans and all her worries and all her family dynamics. Like, it was just a bit of a weird combination, and I just didn't care for it. Also, let's not get into the fact that there was just a really abhorrent sexual assault scene, which was sudden and horrifying. So that's all to say that I appreciated it for what it was, but If I Was Your Girl was not exactly my cup of tea. So all of that being said, it's now time for me to locate and then start reading The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigirdar. Okay, so the thing is, I'm only like 78 pages through The Henna Wars, but I'm kind of not getting along with it. This is proving to be a bit of an issue. It's kind of sending me into a reading slump, in fact, and I can't really put my finger on why, except for the fact that it's an instant attraction kind of story, and that doesn't really do it for me because I don't relate. The story is about this girl Nishat, who at the very beginning of the story comes out to her parents as a lesbian, her Bangladeshi parents. She is herself a first generation immigrant because she was born in Bangladesh and moved to Ireland with her family. And she comes out to her parents, and instead of reacting, they basically choose to kind of ignore the situation because they don't accept her. And you soon meet a school friend of hers from primary school called Flavia, who is half Brazilian, I think, who has moved back to the area, so they're kind of getting reacquainted. It's kind of an immediate attraction thing between Nishat and Flavia, and I'm assuming by the title that this is going to involve Henna. I mean, the only other thing that's kind of not really up my street is the fact that apparently Flavia is kind of friends with, because she's cousins with, a girl who has been effectively a bully of Nishat. So that's immediately putting them against each other in a way that makes me feel kind of uncomfortable. I don't love that. I mean, I hope it gets resolved, but I don't love it. So basically at the moment, my whole feeling is like, I'm just not into it. I mean, I'm not even a quarter of the way through and I'm just not into it. So I'm going to kind of try and get on a roll, try and push on a bit, but this is not looking good. So updates on Henna Wars. I am now 160-ish pages through, I think, which is somewhere between a third and a half. Hello.
You know that TikTok guy that goes around asking everyone what he's listening to?
Yes.
They've just asked Gabriel.
No, what did he say?
I don't know, I just asked him.
Like,
hold that thought.
Probably Maria, what I suppose. Yeah. I don't know if I'm enjoying it more necessarily, because there have just been a lot of scenes that are kind of horrifying.
I was just not sleeping enough for that.
Like, there's an ongoing theme of cultural appropriation, and Flavia is turning out to not be very nice. Said cultural appropriation. There's also real distinct homophobia. It's all very concerning, and I'm kind of uncomfortable. So it's not proving to be great so far. One of the redeeming factors is the relationship between Pretty and Nishat, so the two sisters. That's cute. I'm liking that dynamic, but in terms of just general vibes, it's not great. I definitely think I'm not liking this one as much as Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating. I think that's pretty certain. Hello there. I am now 251 pages through The Henna Wars, and it's getting better. I'll be honest with you, I was really kind of turned off by all the negativity and the storylines that were just awful. And I have to say, my major critique of this book so far is still that there's no let up really of happy moments to counteract the sad and the negative and the angry. It's kind of a constant cycle of issues which the main character Nisha is not really being able to break out of very much at all, especially when it comes to her parents, and she's just had another situation which is just really awful. And minor spoiler here, I am sick and tired of outing scenes. Like, there's no need for it. It's overly dramatic and so damaging. Like, I am so upset for Nishat, like, that this happened to her. I know that this can happen in real life, and indeed may well happen reasonably often, but just, it's prominently in so many of these YA stories, and it just makes me upset on behalf of teenagers who might be reading this and expecting that they are constantly in danger, when it doesn't have to be like that. It really doesn't. Nisha has no queer community. She is in a war with this other girl who she was into and now is culturally appropriating her stuff. Her sister is angry with her. Her parents hate her because she's a lesbian and won't talk to her. It's all just kind of awful. When I say that I'm actually enjoying it now, I say that because I am like involved in the flow of it. Like, there is this burgeoning building plot which I am now swept up in, but I'm not happy reading it. I'm in no way happy, and I'm actually really beginning to be confused about how I'm going to tell between this one and If I Was Your Girl. So the situation is a little bit interesting. So I've got like a third left, I think, and I'm hoping things work out. I'm hoping that things come together in a much more positive way than they are now. I fundamentally don't want Nishat to get with the girl that she's crushing on, and I'm concerned that that's where it's headed, judging by the cover. But yeah, it's complex. It's really complex. Thematically, I am so into the discussion of cultural appropriation and sort of racist ideology, like, you know, everyday racism and sort of all sorts of issues entangled with those things. Like, this is great, but it is so deeply sad to read that I don't know how high I can rate it. I really don't. Kissed for the first time, and as you know, I'm not really a fan of the situation, but the love interest, she's finally showing that she understands what she's been doing wrong, like the deep cultural appropriation. The two main characters are just not good together. I just really don't think that there's been enough shown of them actually getting along in any sort of meaningful way. They might be attracted to each other, like sexually, but there hasn't been any formulation of a relationship aside from that. I don't like it. Like, instant attraction is not my thing. Really, only that instant attraction is what is carrying this romance, apparently. And I just don't believe in it. And they clearly aren't good for each other. They just keep hurting each other. Anyway, I'm nearly at the end, so we'll update you soon. So I have finally finished the Henna Wars after much agony. It just wasn't good for me, but also I would argue the narrative itself needed a lot of work. Like I was explaining yesterday evening, the emotions remain negative pretty much the whole book, apart from right at the end when things get happy and wonderful, which we'll talk about later. There is no kind of variation or breadth or kind of interesting dynamics of emotion and plot. It's just sad or anger inducing the whole way through, and so I was just not happy, and it really sent me into quite a reading slump. I've spent several weeks reading this book now, and as you've seen from previous vlogs, usually these kind of books take me a couple of days, you know, so this has not been a good one. In the end, I gave the Henna Wars 2.25 stars, which is like a really low amount, I realise, but I just thought it was necessary this time round. It just wasn't for me. And there were just so many toxic people in these books. Like, as I said, I just didn't think that the love interest was was nice or worth the main character, although obviously the main character herself was also being very toxic for most of the book. They just weren't good together. They didn't show any emotional connection, they didn't show any friendship, they basically just showed attraction. It wasn't, I just didn't like that. And more importantly, I've noticed a trend between this and the previous book of hers that I read. There's this casualness about seeking consequences for people who have done the horrendous racist and or homophobic things in each of the two books. The main character in both books kind of goes, oh, I don't want to bother, like, it's fine. And I really can't relate to that attitude. But moreover, I just think it's quite a damaging thing to just be brushing off these incidents as soon as things are kind of going fine. Not just for the character, but just like as a narrative point to be expressing to people. I don't like it. There are just so many people in this and the previous book who should have been taught the error of their ways, at least in some respect. And obviously I understand that the point is that the Irish school system, being heavily white dominated and, according to the author, not very up to date on progressive values, is going to struggle to actually deal with these issues properly. But even so, there are things that could be done, and I'm uncomfortable with the idea that it's fine, you just leave it, you know? So here we are, completely taking me by surprise. The winner of today's quest to find the best queer eye romance is If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. I didn't see that coming. Did you see that coming? Because it's wild. I didn't even like it really much. So I don't have anything else to say actually. I have a feeling this vlog is going to be really long because I've actually just had a lot to complain about for both books. So sorry, but also I hope it was interesting. See you in the next video. By the way, I have already filmed and fully edited that one, so it will be coming out quite imminently. I just got so stuck on this book. It's been like nearly 2 months delay reading this book, and I needed to get on with other things. So I have many more videos in the works which will be coming, which I've been working on as soon as this one is out. See you next time. Love ya. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.